84% of businesses go out of business because of lack of cash planning.
Welcome, affiliated listeners, to another, I'm going to say this, important and critical episode of the Affiliated Podcast, because we are going to be talking about the number one most important thing in every single business. I would even argue, some people say it's the number one most important thing in life, and that is cash. We are talking about cash, why cash is king, and why it seems to be a dirty word that people don't like to talk about in business, but it's the number one reason good businesses fail if they don't bring in or they don't manage cash. So we do not want your life and all your success to be ruined because you're afraid of the dirty word of cash, or you avoid it, or you just mismanage it because you think it's just going to follow this guy. And today is all about that, how to have proper cash management, how to keep your cash flows, and even talking about forecasting. And you think this sounds boring? I'm going to tell you what right now. It might sound boring, but it's not only not boring because we have an amazing specialist guest who's going to make it super exciting. But most importantly, it is critical to your long-term success, and it could take a good business and make it last for a long time, and a great business into something special. But it could also destroy even the best of businesses when not done properly. And there's even some very famous cases of things like that happening. WeWork is a really good one, right? So you can collect a lot of money, but you still have to make it and manage it. So anyway, lots of really great things here. Let me not wait any longer and bring in Rachel Phillips, the CEO of Fully Accountable, an accounting expert, an amazing person. And who would ever not want to listen to somebody in that freaking awesome chair with that great background? Rachel, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Kyle, I'll hit you with a really fun fact that I always tell people. 84% of businesses go out of business because of lack of cash planning, which is a horrifying stat, I think.
That is horrifying, right? Because I don't think, I think it's one of these things people assume that businesses generate cash, which they do, but they also spend cash, right? So you have to make sure those things are in line. So that is a horrifying stat. Almost as horrifying as being a Cleveland Browns fan. So
it's tough. Yeah, it's a tough weekend in my house.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, well, beautiful. Anyway, let's jump into more positive things, and let's talk a little bit. Well, actually, before we jump into talking about cash flow, I'd love for you to just take a moment. Why don't you tell the people a little bit about your background, how you found yourself with Fully Accountable, and your understanding kind of what feels like maybe the most renegade market you have to do accounting in direct response, and how you kind of found yourself in it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually a lawyer by trade, so probably even a less enjoyed profession out there. But our founder of Fully Accountable, I was his law clerk early on in my career. And when they started Fully Accountable, I said, gosh darn, this is a really cool business. At the time in 2014, nobody was really doing accounting for e-commerce businesses, right? The online business was like, generate as much cash as you can, try to keep as much of it as you can, and we'll just live for the next day. And so we were one of the first people that were doing accounting in the space. And I always like to tell people, like, we did remote before it was cool. And so our whole business model was built on a remote base from the beginning. From there, I like to say I play CFO on TV, but I've just gotten the opportunity to work with so many businesses on their operations and cash and financial planning that now it's just ingrained in how we treat each business we work with. And here at Fully Accountable as well.
Well, first, I think a lawyer is just an accountant that knows how to talk. So don't worry. It's just so funny because I literally went from, I was a history major in college with the idea that I'd turn it into becoming a lawyer. Realized I hated studying law. So I went to the thrilling profession of accounting. So I was really going for the heavy hitters in terms of less exciting professions. But I think law is obviously very interesting. I'll actually say a moment, the most romantic of boring professions.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So, but less on law and more on cash flow. So let's talk a little about this. I think, yes, what you did in Fully Accountable, you guys have been amazing and definitely ahead of the game and almost sophisticating a lot of these smaller businesses because where they generate revenue that far exceeds what we normally define or think of as a small business, the operations and staff tend to run like one. And I think that's where you get that 84% number is I imagine a lot of those companies, not all of them, end up being more small to mid-tier or mid-size companies, not tier, but size. So it's super, super critical in our industry because we have a lot more, I'd say structured, not revenue, structured companies that look like small businesses, and cash flow is super critical to keep them floating. So why don't you just talk a little bit about I guess the need, or even that stat, why do so many companies 84% fail? Because they run into cash flow management issues. Like,
Yeah.
what do you think is the driver for that?
No cash planning, right? So there's two things that happen. In particular, in our e-commerce space, there are so many transactions that happen so quickly. It's hard to track the in and the out. And so you just check your bank account to make sure that there's at least as much money or more money than either the day before or the month before. And the problem with that, like you already said, is what about all the money that has to go out that you don't see on the day to day basis or needs to have maybe, I don't know, a physical check written for, right? Those types of things we don't see leave our bank account as quickly as that money that's coming in. And so, one of the biggest issues that we see is no cash flow forecasting, meaning I know these big expenses are coming down the road. I need to save cash now for them, or I just need to be aware of it coming, right? You're planning a big launch. You know that you need to buy inventory. You have to bring on a new team member. Those things are expensive. And if you haven't planned your cash for them, you can quickly deplete the cash in the bank account trying to do it.
Gotcha. And then I imagine you start seeing people kind of adopt the mentality, well, you got to spend money to make money, but yes, but you have to also plan how you're going to spend that money, right? So
Exactly.
so give me kind of an example of like maybe a situation that you've seen where you had somebody come to you and on paper, it looked like it'd be a successful business, but they had no cash planning and some of the problems that started percolating up.
Yeah. So in particular, we see this really heavy right now as we're heading into Q4. So somebody comes in, they had a really strong first half of the year, but they haven't properly inventory planned. They haven't properly planned their promotions or staffed for what looks like the end of the year. And for e-commerce businesses in particular, Q4 is a discount heavy, refund happy, and a very expensive season when it comes to ad spending and any type of marketing dollars. And so, if you haven't started planning for that cash now, we find that you don't have the available dollars to be able to buy the inventory at the lower cost, get the appropriate staff, or run a promotion that makes you competitive in the marketplace. And so, what does that do? You can't buy your inventory now, so you have to buy smaller tranches of inventory, which means you're paying a higher dollar amount for them. You're paying more shipping costs because you've had to order 4 tranches instead of 1 tranche. Maybe you weren't able to bring somebody on, and so you have people working overtime, which, yes, you have a less staff person, but now you're paying maybe overtime. Or you have people that are burnt out, or you have people that quit when you need them most. You're creating other financial problems for you that you aren't necessarily allocating a dollar amount to that add up very quickly.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. It's almost like what really you're doing by not planning is you could probably, and I know you've met them and I met those entrepreneurs that they cobble something together and they create an illusion of success, right? Like they're like, oh, we generated revenue. And that's oftentimes we define it. And then they look at their net profitability in Q1 and they're like, we lost money over that quarter. And so they generated, some sort of revenue, but they ran so inefficiently. And, those employees now are in a situation they got overextended and they weren't really that efficient when they were working to begin with because they were doing something they're unfamiliar with, or just, they had so much other stuff to do. Somewhere you had loss and now you're like, oh crap, I lost money. All that hard work meant for nothing. It could create so many problems. So, I think when we go back to this, I'm curious about this before we jump into what do you do about this? How do you start planning for cash? How can you fix this problem? But beforehand, I want to kind of talk a little bit, get your opinion on how sometimes you've also seen, maybe that's one where, hey, we're not planning at all, but what happens when the factors change, right? So my planning wasn't really that planning, but I'd been maintaining a certain level of revenue. Things were so easy. And now when I launch, things are getting harder. I'm noticing I'm not getting that same top line, which I built my whole system on. And now you're finding you're in the struggle period where cash is what felt like was really easy to get, or revenue is really easy to get. It's becoming constricted. So how could poor cash planning, I think a way to think about it is like, how does good cash planning help you get through a recessionary period when maybe normal business gets really, really hard?
Yeah. And so what I always tell people is your reports should be living reports. They're not static. And we don't just say, oh, we missed this month. We'll just try to figure it out later. Like we need to be adjusting and pivoting based on our current circumstances. So the first thing we do is a 13-week rolling cash flow. When you dial that report in, you are going to be acutely aware of where your cash is at any point in time so that you know when you need to launch something, you have those available dollars for you, or you're aware that it's going to be a cash tight period for 4 to 6 weeks and you can plan other things around that, right? Maybe you don't uh, launch any new campaigns. Maybe you cut low performing campaigns that were generating a little bit of revenue and you use those dollars for your testing campaigns instead, right? You get to choose where you use your dollars differently when you know where they're going. But the flip side of that is once you know what your cash position is, you should be using a budget and a forecast so that you know what your metrics should look like. And if you miss them, how you can adjust. I think the biggest issue that people have is they work a lot on subjective data or objective data that doesn't really help you.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more,
Yeah.
on the objective data that doesn't help you?
Yeah, I think we live in a world where KPI dashboards are this king of like, I have 500 metrics I look at each day. But the reality is, A, you can't ingest that much information and actually make a decision on it. And B, I'm willing to bet my left arm that 490 of those don't actually change the trajectory of your business. It's just something that you're looking at, right? And so at Fully Accountable, we are always telling people like, what are the core 5 to 8 business metrics you need to look at that are actually going to help you identify if you're generating revenue, if you're generating it profitably, and then where are you getting your ROI? Is it labor? Is it cost of goods? Is it advertising? Where do we need to focus on to ensure that when we look at your month over month, you're staying within the percentage ratio that we'd like to be in? And that goes right to our budget and our forecast. I should know what percentage of dollars I've budgeted and what I actually spent each month. And if I can't get to that budgeted, say 15%, and it's really going to be 20%, then where am I adjusting throughout the budget elsewhere so that I have that 20% in my marketing spend?
Gotcha. So just to understand, really, it's all about, if you could remove the noise, it allows you to focus on what really matters. So you could be dynamic in your decision making.
Exactly.
Would you say, especially in like lean times, that gives you a distinct advantage because you don't have to worry about cash being there? You know where it is, and it's more an efficiency of decision making. Is that kind of your general sense, or what you've seen smart businesses ride through kind of harder economic times?
Yeah, exactly. They know where the cash is, where they need to spend it, and when they can spend it, right? Because that's important, right? If you spend it too early, then you don't have it later. If you wait too long, you've perhaps missed an opportunity to generate some revenue. And so knowing how, when, and where are really how that 13-week rolling cash flow is going to make and change your business for you.
So, and I imagine too, it allows you also to start looking at, you could almost plan cash for the unplannable, right? Like you could put into ideas like, hey, we don't know what could happen, but we want to have a basis that if something goes crazy, the business doesn't have to shut down or whatever. We could absorb through that. Well, let's talk about, I really love what you said, the idea of a 13 week cash flow, or was a cash forecast, cash plan, 13 weeks of cash. You want to have 13 weeks of cash.
Rolling cash flow, we call it.
Rolling cash. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to say, I love that it's dynamic. That's really, really awesome to keep things. So you're always aware of where you're at right now, not where you want to be or where you were. Just right now, 13 weeks, here's what we're looking at. So elaborate more on kind of this 13-week, 13-week rolling cash flow. Like, what does that look like, and why 13 weeks?
Yeah. So 13 weeks is always going to give you your current week and then in theory the next quarter. So you're always rolling and adding another week so you're able to look at a quarter at a time. Where I have found that the accounting industry just hasn't really caught up, that we're trying to constantly work against, is that CFOs and accountants are always using on historical data, which really your CFOs should always be looking at like forecasting proactive data for you. I think anything beyond 13 weeks, especially in an industry that moves as quickly as ours does, you're planning for something that just is too early. And so if we're looking at 13 weeks at a time, you're really able to look at what's going on in the moment and keep planning, right? When we look at an election year like we saw last year, marketing costs, advertising were so high. To have planned for what that would look like February of this year would not be accurate because the trends weren't the same. And so when we're looking at data that's digestible in 13-week chunks, we can really give better trends and patterns to our reporting that really make it more accurate for the user, right? Because it would have been really inaccurate to give somebody data for Q1 of this year based on Q3 and Q4 of last year. It's not representative. And so we're working against that to make sure that the data that you're getting actually represents the period that you're in.
That makes so much sense. I'm glad you elaborated on that, the 13 weeks. That's really exciting, honestly. It feels like you're always aligning your cash with what you should be looking to accomplish in that quarter. And then you get to realign as soon as that quarter's over or whatever period you need to. So you're always kind of working. I feel like that. Let me ask you, I know this is a little bit off base. It kind of makes me think of like OKRs. It feels very OKR kind of compliant, feeds right into that. Would you agree with that? Do you see a lot of your clients use kind of OKRs?
Yes, some of them do. Again, I agree with that completely because you're looking at those key pieces of it that are very relevant in the time period, not trying to expand upon something. And I'm jumping here a little bit, but again, that's the biggest issue. You have a budget and a forecast. You make your budget for the next year in October, November of the year before, and then by midway through, it's not relevant anymore. So let's make relevant decisions based on the current circumstances that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. Gosh, preaching the choir. I love this. This is fantastic. So, we will get into the budget and forecast because I think that's something that, just as a teaser, I've heard so many entrepreneurs say they can't. It's impossible. How am I to predict? I think one of the great things, though, how do you predict a year? Right. But I could probably predict the next 13 weeks. Like I could figure out what's going on in a quarter. And I think even if more entrepreneurs thought that way, they could find themselves being more creative and innovative because they don't have to figure out what to do for the next year and almost glob onto that idea for that entire time frame. So let's expand. Let's kind of go back then to the 13 weeks. Like how do I do this? How do I go about building out 13 weeks of rolling cash flow? And then afterwards, we'll talk about how to evaluate as thing changes. But if I'm just staring at my financials, staring at my bank accounts and going, what the hell does all this mean? What do you recommend someone do to start to get these 13 weeks of cash flow?
Yep. You're going to start with what your actual cash flow looks like right now. So what money is in the bank, what money is coming in, what money do you expect to come in, and what are your actual expenses? Here's where people miss the mark on reporting. They want to say and make a report on what the thinnest or the most margin heavy expenses would be. But that's not your current situation, right? Like if you're overpaying for stuff, just own you're overpaying for it in your 13-week rolling cash flow and then start working to adjust it as you go through the weeks, right? Like if labor and payroll are heavy, you need to put the heavy number in there now, and then we'll work to reduce that. I think where people get and why they throw in the towel so easily is at week 2, you're like, I'm so far off base right now, it's not even worth doing this. And it's like, no, you're off base because you used a pipe dream of your expenses, not your actuals. So we start with what the actuals are. We just start there, you own them, and then we work forward. And you will get the best progress by just knowing where you are. So what's payroll? What are your cost of goods? What are you currently spending on marketing, advertising? What are your owner expenses that you're running through the business because it's your business and you own 100% of it? And so things like your car and other expenses, run through it. Like, let's put all of those in there, see what our cash balance is, and then start identifying where we need to make cuts and lean it out.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love that because I think one of the things I'm curious what you think about this, because what I always loved about like statement of cash flows and cash when I was in accounting, it was the only true thing in accounting. Everything else was its own depiction of truth, right? But it was easily to manipulate, right? If debits and credits balanced, that was truth, but that's not real truth. Cash was always true. And I think I'm curious if it's like understanding that cash is truth, you have to be truthful about cash. So do you find that sometimes this is almost like a personal development journey for people that they just have to learn to be a bit more honest as an entrepreneur?
Completely. Because here's the one thing that most people don't understand. Just because you made a profit doesn't mean you made more cash. Right. So to your point, you could manipulate the profit and loss statement, and it's not being malicious or deceiving or fraudulent, but your profit and loss could look like you made a profit, but really your balance sheet has so many expenses, be loans or other debts that you're paying on that don't hit your P&L. You're actually cash poor. And so what gets deceiving for people is they'll say, oh, I made all this money and I have a 20% margin. And we're like, but you're burning cash at a 10% each month and you've only got X amount of runway, right? So those are two very different things. And to your point, that cash flow statement is objective, where the profit and loss could be subjective.
Yeah. Yeah. And if anyone doesn't believe that, go look at professional sports teams'
Yeah.
ledgers. Like
Yes.
their P&L makes no sense, but they sure have a lot of cash. So no, I think that's really good. So let me ask you this, like what and this is kind of, I think, a hard thing maybe to answer, but like if you're in that state where you're struggling to be honest with cash flow, this, like what do you recommend people do? Like what is a way that maybe they could overcome this so they're not fighting against this rolling 13 weeks? If they find that blocker where they're either uncomfortable or they don't know what to look at, like what do you think is the grounding thing, or maybe what they should be doing to get themselves ready for that honesty? Because if you can't be honest with this stuff, you can't do a rolling 13-week cash budget or anything.
Completely. So here's what I always tell people. If you want in your business the ability for you to spend 10, 20, 40, I don't care, $100,000 a month on personal stuff, then we're just going to build in a bucket that says executive expenditures, owner's additional comp, whatever that is that you want available to you each month because that's how you've paid for your lifestyle. It truly does not impact me, right? It's really, as long as I can get that in there as a line item and it's something that that we're accounting for so that we can increase cash, then your goal is just to stay within side of it and be okay when I tell you, hey, Kyle, we budgeted you 40K and you spent 70. So are we going to take away the next 30,000 of next month and you're getting $10,000? Or do we need to really adjust this and just be okay with it? Like, if you can have the hard conversations with somebody that's knowing that they're on your side about it, then we're going to work through it together. Like, again, it's your business. As a CFO, accountant, it's our job to help you increase your margin, increase your cash. And so the best thing that you can do is be honest with us and hear the feedback. And again, if you need that 70K, then we're going to bake in 70K. But if you can keep it at the 40, then let's keep it at that 40 and be okay when we tell you went over.
Yeah. No, I love that. Like cash does not judge. It just reports. So remember that it's almost like going to your doctor. Just tell them all the stuff. I tell this to my wife all the time. It's like, you don't need to win going to your doctor. Just tell them, just vomit every ache and pain or thing you might think it is. That's what they want. They just need the data. Well, that's fantastic. So let's go back to them. So let's say we've done the full accounting of like, okay, these are all my expenses. Honestly, this is actually what I'm spending. So what's the next step that you need to start doing when you're looking at this active rolling 13 weeks of cash?
Yep. We're going to look at revenue. So what are you bringing in? Is it all transaction pays deposits into your bank in the next 1 to 2 days, or do you have a receivable? And then what we're going to do is identify what's our standard percentage of refunds, are there chargebacks, and if you have receivables, what's the collectability percentage? And then what we want to do is just follow a trend on where's growth. Are we in a place that we're trying to grow revenue? Are we staying steady? And so we're going to want to incrementally build out what we believe revenue to look like, broken out in those various different buckets. One of the things that I find to be very important is there's a difference amount of what your gross sales versus what gets deposited in your bank account. And I want to know what those gross sales are, because it's important to know what your refund percentage is, right? In our industry, chargeback percentage is really important, right? Be it for your merchants or even just to know what the customer, right? That's a really important metric. So I want to know what the gross sales will be and then break it down by those sub metrics as well. And so you're going to be able to then see, are we growing? Are we staying steady? Are we seeing dips? There's times a year. Are there seasonality that we need to account for? All of those things matter. And so we want to start using that as we continue to build out that 13 weeks.
There's one metric you mentioned that I think we should, just in case the audience hasn't been immersed in accounting, they might not know. When you talked about receivables and collectability. So if you could just I know it sounds crazy, but even just expand really briefly in the way that accounting describes a receivable and what that collectability percentage means.
Absolutely. So it would be that somebody may have bought something from you, but didn't pay the full amount today. So Think about if it's a 3-time payment, right? So 3 payments of $19.99 on the first of the month every month. You would have 1 payment today of the $19.99, but you would still have a receivable of the $38.98 outstanding, or $39.98 outstanding due to you over the course of the next 2 months. And so in September, you'd have 1 payment, in October, you'd have 1 payment, and in November and October, November's payment would be your receivable. And so I want to know, how many of those October payments do I expect to collect, and how many of those November payments do I expect to collect? Because the odds are you're not going to receive 100% of them.
Yeah.
And it could be
correct.
reasons, declines, cancellations, you name it. But we need a collectability percentage for those.
Yeah. And because I itemize, I always bring that up because I think there's a lot of people that don't always evaluate what's happening in the receivables, if they're even like addressing them. And I remember in audit seeing receivables that have been out there for years, and it's like, what are you doing with this? Like, you're not getting this money, so like, let's start writing it off and stop assuming it's a part of cash, or potential cash. So fantastic. Okay, so we got our expenses. We now figure out gross revenue to actual cash flow, right? We understand the path and the difference, and that's mapped out. We just opine a little bit, like, why is it so critical to know not just the gross number, but know like basically all the things that are happening before it gets to cash in the actual checking account? Like, walk me through what's important about that.
Yeah, it's important because each of those will have a percentage tied to your gross revenue. And so the easiest way to identify that there's some issue in your business is one of those percentages being out of whack, right? So, the easiest one to quickly identify is marketing spend. It's consistently X percent, X percent, X percent. And then all of a sudden 1 week you see Y percent, and it's 3 times the amount of what you typically see. That's going to tell you something is going on in your marketing. Maybe campaigns aren't performing like they used to. Maybe your budget went up and it's not backing out as a revenue perspective. So that's going to be a quick early indicator to you something's going on. The second one that we always see are refunds. So did you launch something new that people are buying and refunding very quickly? Because refunds are expensive. You pay for the sale. You also have to pay for the refund when it comes to your merchant account. So how can we quickly identify when one of those metrics are out of whack? We're looking at our 13-week cash flow, and as a percentage, has one of them skyrocketed or dropped? And that would indicate to you that there is some issue within that bucket.
Nice. So that's kind of where you use a historical basis to set ratios, so you could get signals when it says, hey, something's off. Because that's going to make it very hard for you to predict where your cash is like what amount of cash is actually going to make to the bank account, which you need for the 13 weeks. Okay, that's fantastic. So all right, next step, we have the revenue kind of mapped out, and now we're into the cash portion. Now we actually have gotten to the point where cash is going out, cash is coming in, and here's how it's coming in. What's the next step?
Honestly, the next step then is to track it each week to make sure and see how close you are. And if you're not close, going in and dialing in and figuring out where you're missing it. Because once you find you're within a percentage of 2 to 5%, if you're a little bit smaller, maybe 1 to 2% of where your cash actually is, then you're off to the races, right? You know your position, you know what's going on, and you can then use that report to plan marketing, inventory, sales, growth, whatever initiative you're looking to launch. You now have a cash plan in front of you to be able to do that.
That's awesome. And it doesn't sound crazy hard. It sounds like you might have to do some internal stuff, but obviously very, very critical. Now, one thing I want to go back to, like, so if you're going through this exercise, what happens if you realize I don't have 13 weeks of cash? Like, I can't even cover all this over a 13-week period. I'm only at 7. So like, what do you do in that point? I imagine, curious what you would do.
Yeah. So I would say just if you can only do 7 weeks at a time, start with 7 weeks, right? So if you're saying like I'm running out of cash in 7 weeks, then we quickly need to dive into our expenses and find out what can be cut. I say this all the time and people think I'm crazy, but you can almost always every month find yourself somewhere between $1,500 to $7,500 worth of expenses you didn't need to spend. And it's almost always you signed up for something. It was a recurring billing. We're all marketers at heart. We all like to go by the you name it. And in 3 months, you completely forgot that it's billing you. And so you have 3 $49.99 things. Or my favorite is you have 4 people on your team that all need a LinkedIn account or an Adobe Photoshop account. But there's this beautiful thing called a corporate account that would be a third of the cost for you. And so are you overpaying for random things that you don't need to? That if you just take some time to dial in those expenses, you will find cash in your business that's available to you. But when you're cash flow positive, you tend to look past those because it's not something that's in dire need in the moment. So sometimes those cash strapped businesses can save themselves by just looking at their expenses.
That's so good. I mean, that's a life thing for all of us, right? Like
Totally.
how many times do you forget that membership that's just been going? You're like, I don't even know what this is. Mine is currently a history app that I downloaded many months ago. And I was like, I should probably stop paying for this because I have not used it since the 3 weeks I thought it was the coolest thing ever. So no, that's great. Now, like you said, when you're cash positive, we tend to not worry about this because we don't think we have to. Yet we should always worry about it so we never have to, right? So awesome. So we have the 13 weeks. We adjusted that down. And hopefully what it does is it gives you answers to what might feel like an impossible question to answer. That's what I'm really hearing from this is now we have answers. So I just want to recap again for people because I think this is really critical. And I tell you, if you do not have 13 weeks in your cash that are allocated and you know where they're going and they exist in your business, you need to stop and you need to listen because you need to go through this process. It'll make your business actually have life and potential, and it'll change the way you get to go about it. So, Rachel, just to recap again, we're going to first start with an honest collecting of all of our expenses in our business, every single thing that we have to spend or we are spending on. And even if it's your own personal, hey, listen, I have a big time habit on Pokemon cards and I want to spend $10,000 a month on them. Fine. You just have to be honest. That's what you want. Just be honest. And then from there, we want to be, hey, where's our revenue? What is actually going from gross revenue to into my checking account? Do I understand all the steps between? Do I have all that laid out? And do I have ratios associated with it? So from there, I could then say we have 13 weeks. Or X weeks, hopefully 13. But you only need to get to 13. Hey, we cover and we know if these ratios stay the same, things are going to be okay. And if those ratios already are screwed up, it doesn't matter because now you at least have an honest way to look at it and say, where's the problem? What do we need to fix?
Well, and you know where to start, right? You can pick which one you want to start with. I think people feel like they have to fix everything. Like just fix one thing at a time, right? Start at the one that's the most mucked up and fix it and then move to the next.
Yeah, you don't have to eat the whole sandwich in one bite. I mean, impressive if you can, but most of us just choke and die. So don't choke and die on a hero sub. Just take a bite at a time, right? So no, I love that. So let's kind of talk. I think from there, people like honestly, if you haven't done this in your business and you listen to this episode and you just stop here, you've just gotten like mounds of value. So thank you so much for that, Rachel. I really love this. But we're going to actually go the next step, which is you're going to be fixing things and so on and so forth. But the other part of this is you want to start looking into forecasting. So you might fix your life a little bit, but you still might have to be in a situation where you have to start forecasting what's going to continue to happen. Because maybe you are in a period where revenue is down and you need to forecast how you're going to get it up and what that cash flow and cash will look like. And a lot of us don't even know what to do. We just throw our hands up and say, that seems too hard. This world seems too volatile. I know when it's going good, and then I'll just keep trying to make it better. Like I've heard that innumerable amounts of times. So let's talk about forecasting. First, tell me why it's so important. And you mentioned earlier, you said this earlier, I think it was really, really important. A good CFO shouldn't be looking at historicals. They should be accounting for what is about to happen and what's coming next. And it doesn't mean you have to always be right, but the ones that are more right make more money, right? So
totally.
I think that's a good thing about it.
Well, and I think the problem that people have with budgeting and forecasting is this. You set it at a time period when you're planning for the next year and you're in the gist of like, it's going to be the new year. I'm going to do all this stuff like New Year's resolutions. We're going to go make $100 million next year, but $100 million is 7xing the size of your business. And it's like, that's just not going to happen. And so, where I always get into it with like traditional accountants is your budget should not be static. Your budget should be operational and it should be a living document with your forecast. And so what I want to see when I'm looking at a forecast is what have I forecasted and what have I budgeted? And then what did I actually do? And if I'm looking at those three numbers next to each other, just like my cash flow forecast that I talked about, I'm going to quickly be able to identify where I'm off. And so going back to the earlier, like if I've only pegged marketing's ad spend to be 20%, but I'm consistently paying 35%, then I need to forecast at 35% marketing spend. And then what does that 35% generate for me as top line revenue? Right. And so if you know what your marketing spend is and what that should generate for you, you can create a very real and likely accurate forecast for you that you can then plan for how you'd like to scale. You can only scale though if you have the cash to invest those dollars, right? It's very difficult to scale a business when you're cash poor, right? Because you don't have money to go invest in it to continue to grow that revenue.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's really interesting about that too, kind of what you're saying, just to continue on with it, like when you find this, I think you can say it doesn't have to be stuck, right? It doesn't have to be static, which is really, really powerful. Because I think, let me ask you, I don't know, have you ever been in a company, and we'll go kind of quick because we don't see this as much in entrepreneurs, but let's say we have that audacious, we're getting 100,000 or 100 million this year. We're going to 7x our business in this year. Here's the idea. We're launching a green juice. And then, then the first quarter hits and we are 10% to goal, and you're like, this is not good, right? Yes. It's showing no signs of getting closer. Like what, like, and I have some thoughts on I feel like it's a suffocating environment and people start quitting. Is that similar to what you've seen? Because I think sometimes people think by not adjusting that people work harder, but I think you actually get a complete inverse effect.
I do too.
I don't know if it's like being a Browns fan, but I would tell you, once Deshaun Watson was your quarterback, after a while, you probably were like, how hard do I really want to work? If this is what I'm like, could I even set that? If they say Super Bowl is the goal and you look at your quarterback and you're like, are you sure? So walk me through kind of like why you think there's downsides to that kind of long forecasting and what the shorter and being able to adjust your forecast, what it actually does to your company, not just you.
Well, I think as people, we like wins. Right. And so I'm not saying we need to win every day, but I think we like a win. And so I think there's an inherent value of saying, as the owner, the CEO, the person who said that, of raising your hand and saying, I missed, right? I had a pipe dream that we were going to do this. That's not our reality. So let's reforecast, let's recast some vision and set something so that when you do in the next quarter win that, people rally behind you and rally behind the company. They're not sitting there being like, I still have another 82% deficit to make up, right? That feels draining and it feels unachievable. Getting a win feels empowering, and maybe we'll end up making up some of that because people feel invigorated and motivated based on some success.
That is so powerful. I really want more entrepreneurs and business owners to like think about that. Like, you do not have to stick to your forecast because you said it.
Yeah.
you don't have to.
Right.
There's no reason to. Like, if it's not working, adjust and make people motivated, even if they know they failed. You could say, hey, we missed. We didn't hit it. That's fine. We're here to fail. Let's go set the new target and go get that one. And if you fail at that one, forecast and adjust again. It's all iterative. And like you said, it's a living document. A living document is meant to change because we are really focused on doing the right behaviors of driving towards that end goal. And you could always put 100 million out there. Go get 100 million.
Totally.
But you're not going to do it always in the timeline you want. But if you keep focusing on it and just say, eventually you could hit that if you just don't have to be so, well, we didn't hit 100 million this year. I'm giving up, or I'm firing my entire staff because they're incompetent and I'll 10X with a new one. You know, something like that. That's just it's not sustainable or ever going to be helpful. And you'll probably be one of the 84% that collapse versus the ones that succeed.
Well, and I always tell people, would you rather on December 31st close the chapter and be at your New Year's Eve party and said, I made $10 million and I had a negative 10% margin? Or would you rather say I made $5 million, but I hit my gross revenue goal? Or would you rather say I made $5 million, but kept 20% of that in my business? Like, okay, maybe the top line doesn't sound as sexy as the 10 million, but I'll tell you, I'd rather keep $1 million than have lost $1 million for my business, right?
I'll tell you what, people are smart enough to realize net profitability keeps the lights on, keeps their jobs going.
Yeah.
And so they don't care about top line if it doesn't come down to keeping cash in the bank accounts.
Yep.
And most people don't want to be unemployed.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
I think some entrepreneurs don't care. And I think they have to remember that. Like, most of your employees do care about being hired. You probably are like, I'll just start a new business. I always think the
Right.
Michael Scott line from when he has a paper company, he goes, I have thousands of paper ideas. Or names for paper companies. You don't understand. I'll just do a new one again. I was like, yeah, entrepreneurs might have that mindset, which makes them so good, but most of their staff doesn't think that way.
Exactly.
So yeah, no, that's a really good thing to remember. And I love that. So, well, honestly, we covered a lot here, and we're getting kind of close on time, but I think this is super, super powerful information. So just to recap again with the forecasting, I think the big thing I want you to think with forecasting, if you have the 13 weeks and you have an understanding of those ratios, you can now forecast out. But the thing to remember is that is not a death sentence. It is not a commitment that you are stuck to. It's not a prearranged marriage, guys. Like, we're dating here with our forecast. If things change, you find out you're like, whoa, that's too much for me. Go on to the new forecast, find success, keep people motivated. And those goals are things like, I think Atomic Habit talks about it. We took goals as missions and we confused the two, right?
Yes.
A goal is could be adjusted all the time. A goal is really just a way to keep us disciplined and do the right behaviors. But like, there's too many other factors that could make goals not work. And that's why so many people fail on New Year's resolutions. It's a big goal for a whole year. And then they fail in the first week. I'm like, well, I screwed up. Guess I'll just quit and go back to being who I always am. But if it was instead like, hey, I'd like to, but most importantly, I'm just going to commit to the behaviors and wait until I get that, they would have a huge transformation at the end of every year. So, and it's no different than business. So that being said, we covered a lot here to help get people healthy, but we're probably just really scratching the surface on the needs that these companies have and entrepreneurs have with CFO work and accounting work, but that might be inaccessible. So why don't you just talk a little bit? This is a great time to talk a little about what Fully Accountable does for entrepreneurs. You mentioned, hey, you get to play CFO, cosplay CFO all the time, which is super fun. But walk me through kind of like what you guys do and who the right businesses are for you.
Yeah. So we are an outsourced accounting and finance department. So everything from your bookkeeper to your CFO. And the beautiful part about us is we're completely customizable to you. So you have a bookkeeper that you love, we'll be your CFO. You have a CFO that you love, but they're getting stuck in the weeds of doing all of the data entry. Let us do that for you so that CFO can be your proactive guiding light in your business and actually be worth a lot of money that you spend on them each month. And so our goal for you is twofold. One, to be a part of your team to help you grow your business, and two, make you feel like you've got somebody on your side in your finance department so that you don't have to worry about it. The greatest compliment for us that we typically get is, I was able to sleep at night knowing that my cash was protected because you're looking at it each day. And that truly is what we do. For those people that like listen to this and are like, I really liked everything that she said, but I need to go do a first version of it. I have no idea how to build this report. Head to our website. We have templates of a 13-week rolling cash flow and an operational forecast and budget that will give you the first version of what you need to work on and what you need to be looking at if you want to implement it into your business today. And if it's something you're like, I need to talk about it more, we do strategy calls with our CFOs. They're free, no commitments, no nothing, but they'll talk through it with you. Basically anytime during regular banking hours, right? We aren't going to do it at 2 a.m, but you're 9 to 5. We're happy to have that conversation with you.
Awesome. No, that's good. Now, do you guys primarily only work with domestic entities or do you international business as well?
Yeah, we do international, we do domestic. I was going to say we do business. We do, U.S. businesses, foreign businesses, you name it. Yep.
Beautiful. Oh, I'm going to give a little plug too, just because you guys, we've worked with you guys for a long time. And even I worked at a company that used your services directly as well. Fantastic. And one thing I want to say that's really, really special about you guys, the industry so well, it is almost impossible to find employees out in the wild that you could plug in and understand this world to get the outcome and professionalism that you really need from these positions, because these are some of the most critical positions you'll ever hire in your business. When it comes to your CFO, your bookkeepers, the people that are handling this. And as you well know, the number one place for fraud and manipulation and people stealing from you all comes from these positions. So getting people that you could trust to come in there with expertise, with credibility, and an infrastructure that's going to protect you is critical to keeping every CEO doing what they do best, which most likely is not finance, which is why they are CEOs, because finance people, not always their jam, unless they just have so much money they feel like they can never lose, right?
Yeah. I
And
appreciate
so,
that. Thank you.
yeah. I think finance people are really just cheaters that don't want to cheat. They're like, I only want to win all the games and I only play when I can win. So
That's funny.
anyway, but no, that's really great. And I love that that's on. We'll make sure to put in the show notes there. But I just want to tell everyone like that will change your business so much. So even if you just go through the templates and get that consulted call, and maybe you're like, hey, I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
Make it a goal in your business as you continue to work on these strategies. You work on that cash. Get yourself through the time that you could have that, because it's going to make a huge difference. And we really appreciate the time. We'll have to definitely do this again, because I think it's great to talk about these critical things with cash flow and business. And you make it so fun and entertaining because you're a lawyer. So, it's much more entertaining than those accountants as I'm an accounting major. So I get to make fun of me all the time.
Exactly. Yeah.
So beautiful. Anything else before you go? Any other, I know we're getting close into Q4. If there's any tidbits you just want to throw out there as a PSA to all the folks, if not, we'll just let you go and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, I would just say it's not too early to plan for Q4, and it's not too early to plan for taxes. And so while you're rounding the corner of September as you're heading into October, if you need somebody to take a look at your stuff, like again, we give free strategy calls, but it's never too early. So don't spend the week of Christmas and the week of New Year's trying to crash plan for taxes. Like spend that time with your family and invest the time now.
Beautiful. I love it. Yes. Taxes. Just scratching the surface is some of my favorite things to talk about. So, fantastic. Well, Rachel, again, thank you so much for the time. And honestly, from a football fan to a football fan, I do hope Cleveland has a funner year this year than last year. And hey, they were live on Sunday. Like it was a fun game. Well, maybe not fun, but it was a close game. So that defense still looks good. So you always have that. But really, really appreciate the time. Appreciate you. Appreciate Fully Accountable. And guys, please rate, review, subscribe, and go check out Fully Accountable. It doesn't matter who you are. Take those templates, build it into your business. You'll be so much better off. Even if you're new, you will grow with so much more efficiency and intelligence, and you're not going to be trying to fix problems when you have too much success. So really, really key. Get that done. Also, if you have any questions or things you'd like us to talk about on the podcast, please go to affiliated@clickbank.com. Thomas reads those emails, and then he sends them over to me. Sometimes he prints them out and hands them to me, because I might as well be a boomer in a millennial's body. So with that, though, Thomas is not here, so he'd say happy scaling, and I will say peace out there. Thanks so much. Until next time.